Well, thank you very much for the welcome and for this opportunity to come and spend this time with you and to meet again the many people here who accompanied the Archbishop and I on the pilgrimage to Rio. The first thing I need to say is that the Archbishop apologises for not being here. He was meant to give this catechesis tonight and to be with you as we celebrate the feast of the Assumption of Mary. You might know that, or certainly the pilgrims would know, that on the pilgrimage he became quite ill. He developed a very deep cough. And it's taken him now 2 courses of antibiotics, and still the cough is there, so he needs to have a bit more treatment, I think, before he's able to resume his duties. So in desperation, Anita got in touch with me, and she asked whether I would step in and try and do my best to give a little bit of the experience that we had as we journeyed to Rio, and maybe to focus on one very important consequence, I suppose, of this World Youth Day. This morning I was talking to a group of priests. We have a council of priests that meets every couple of months, and I was asked to just explain a little the experience of World Youth Day in Brazil. And it's always hard to, in words, explain an experience or help people get a taste for that experience that you might have had yourself. But it was very good to have that occasion to use those days that we had of moving through Brazil in the first stage before we arrived in Brasilia, the capital, and then finally going down to Rio itself and taking part in the events of World Day during that week. And it was good to have that opportunity to think about and to ponder a little on those experiences that we had. Those that didn't accompany us might have read something in the record of the journey that I described. But the first thing that we did once we arrived in Brazil was to go out to that magnificent Iguazu Falls. And it was there that we had the opportunity to recover after the long flight. We flew from Perth to Africa to Brazil. The Iguazu Falls are on the border between Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. And those that have seen the film The Mission will remember, I think, in those first few scenes of the movie, scenes of these particular falls. They're a colossal phenomenon. In fact, they are the one of the great natural wonders of the world. We were told that nearly 3 million litres of water were passing over those falls every second. That's enough to fill an Olympic swimming pool, so that was happening every second while we were there. But from there, more importantly for us, I think, we took a journey down into Argentina to visit one of the Jesuit missions that was established in the late 1600s. And it was wonderful to see, because many of us had heard the stories of how the Spanish and the Portuguese had colonized Latin America and how very brutal they had been in establishing the church, if you like, in forcing people to become Christian, forcing them to be baptized, and in that way establishing the church as they went along. This was another story. This was a good story because it's the story of the church doing something for those Indians who lived in that part of the world and who were being captured, taken into slavery. This slavery is something that has been a feature of Brazil for several hundreds of years, and it was only in the late 1800s that finally Brazil gave up slavery. So this was the story of the church protecting people, the Jesuits especially, creating these towns where the people could be brought and they could be given the protection and the shelter that they needed from the slavers. So that was a good thing. That was a wonderful thing for us to be able to see and to appreciate that the church really had done some really wonderful things for those who were considered to be, in a sense, worthless. They were the people that the Holy Father described in one of his talks, those that the world considers to be disposable. And yet the church was there helping them as it should be in every age. We then went to Brasilia and we spent about 5 days there with families who gave us incredible accommodation and hospitality. And these people, admittedly in a parish that was probably better off than many others, but these people gave without counting the cost, really. They were fantastic. And there were occasions when we tried to offer something, but they would never accept it, and they gave tremendously to us. But at the same time, there was again, in these days in the diocese, this wonderful connection made between our young pilgrims and those families. When it came to say farewell, it was certainly very, very emotional. A sign of that connection that had been established between us and them. A connection that I think is certainly forged by the common faith that we have. We then went from Brasilia to Rio, and there are many stories that I'm sure we'll share over tonight and at other meetings about that experience that we had of being with 3 million people, sharing faith with them, sharing worship with them, sharing a beach with them. And it was just extraordinary to see that huge number of people coming together because of their faith, wanting their faith to be strengthened, wanting to know what it is that God wants them to do, to take that sense of mission back with them to their homelands. There are many sources already that will give us the texts of the Holy Father's talks and sermons and encounters that he had with people during the World Youth Day week. And you'll find there so much of what he said, so much of the wisdom, so much of the personal experience that he has had of God in his life, the fact that he has this fantastic way of explaining in very simple ways his faith is something that comes through in these talks, in the things that you will read about World Youth Day and the messages that he gave. One of the messages that he gave was one that I would rather like to focus on tonight. And he was talking about faith, and he was talking about how we are called by God to faith and what that means in our life, and starting people to think about what do we do, how do we live our life with this faith. One of the things he said which caught my attention was that we who have been called by God are called to be people of hope, to live with hope, to be signs of hopefulness to the world. And he explained a little about that in a reflection that he made on, I think, what might be the first reading of the Mass tonight, where we see the image of Mary and how in her life she came to experience the presence of God, the truth that God exists in the events that occurred in her life. The reflection that he gave was on the book of Revelations, and it's about that fantastic story of the woman who is about to give birth, and she's taken out into the desert where she seeks refuge, being pursued by Satan, by this dragon. And the Holy Father was helping us to understand that even though there are many, many difficulties in our lives, many things that we feel are way beyond our strength, way beyond our capacities to solve, he said, always remember that God never allows us to be overwhelmed. He never allows us to be overwhelmed by these things that appear in our lives, these things that seem to be beyond our strength. In those moments in our life when we feel discouragement, when we experience in life that the efforts that we make even to evangelize, we feel are things that are not bearing any fruit. When we reflect on the relationships that we have with others and how perhaps in some ways how badly they've gone, and we don't know how to mend them, we don't know how to be reconciled. He says, always remember that God is there, that God is the reason for our hope, our sense of hope. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, if you look back into the scriptures, yes, you can find great examples of how people came to know God, to know his presence in their life, to know that he exists. You look at the great figures like Abraham or Moses. You see people there who began perhaps not fully understanding who God is, or understanding why God would be even interested in them. And they come to a deeper faith because they experienced his work, his strength, his grace working in their lives. Moses, for example. Moses is one that I can relate to because he shared in a particular problem that I have. When God called Moses to go back to Egypt and to bring the message about himself to his people, to the Hebrew people, and to tell them that he was going to deliver them and set them free, Moses said to God, I can't do this because my speech is impaired. In other words, he had a stammer. And in a way, God was able to work even with this imperfect creature to do a fantastic work for his people. I'd say that I share in this because this was the experience that I had. When I entered into the seminary to begin my formation as a priest, I entered the seminary with the same impairment, with this difficulty of forming words, of stuttering, of having a stammer. And still at times, you might notice I might stop and hesitate when I'm pronouncing certain words. And I think it was in my second year in the seminary, and nothing seemed to be changing. And I can remember one night praying to God, saying, if you want me to be a priest, you have to do something about this. You have to make it possible for me to be able to speak straight. It was only a week or two later that a fellow came to the seminary to teach us about speechcraft and how to project the voice and how to breathe properly. And I was just amazed that this answer to my problem appeared, that God had listened. And it was from that moment when we did this little course with this man that I then felt the confidence to be able to continue. So for me, that was just one instance of where God made himself known to me, became very, very present to me. And I really, from that point on, have been able to, in some way, imagine his presence, him standing by me in many, many other occasions when I have felt that the challenge is far too great. So the Holy Father was just saying, look at those sorts of things in your own life. Treasure those moments when you have come to realize that God was present, God was working in that thing that you thought was impossible, was so difficult. Because that gives you hope for that next occasion, for that next difficulty, for that other task that seems beyond you, that the Lord can be the one who is your strength. The second point he made was we need to be open to a God who surprises us. And I guess that example that I've just given was an example where God surprised me. Anyone, he said, who is a man or a woman of hope, the great hope which faith gives us, knows that even in the midst of difficulties, God acts and he surprises us. And I think this is also something that he has learnt himself. He has learnt how God in many ways has entered into a situation for him and in a surprising way has assisted him and helped him. So he was talking about something that was very real to him. That we can expect God to act. We can expect God to be there for us and to be the one who enables us to achieve what we are dreaming of, what we are hoping for. He asks us to let ourselves to be surprised by his love, to accept his surprises. And the third thing he said, if you are a person that can see that God is the source of your hope, that you are open to a God who can act in your life, who can surprise you, then you can do nothing but live with joy. This hope and this openness means that we can live with joy. And there are plenty of examples, I'm sure, of how God, being at our side, has taken away from us many fears and will continue to do that in our lives. God is real, God is present, God stands beside us, God is the source of our hope. This, I think, is a wonderful message that He has given us, something for us to reflect on. The last thing that I would like to say tonight is that we have experienced again a World Youth Day, this time with another Pope. John Paul II was the first to inaugurate and to sponsor and to be present at those World Youth Days up until his death. Pope Benedict continued to carry on this wonderful tradition of meeting with the youth of the world from time to time in these World Youth Days. And now Pope Francis, seeing the value of this, continues this beautiful tradition and custom in the Church. Pope Benedict made a little change to World Youth Day. And there were quite a number of our pilgrims from Australia who were able to engage in a mission. And so some would go to Peru. Quite a number of them were from Sydney. And they worked in some of the villages with the local people on very simple little projects that made an enormous difference to their lives. Helping them in the building of a school or the building of a little chapel, or helping them in just putting together furniture that was needed in an orphanage or a hospital. These were just simple little acts of charity. These were little missions that Pope Benedict thought would be a wonderful thing for our young people to do. To, in that way, put faith into action. And it was amazing to hear from some of those others that what an incredible impact that had on them. It was hard work in some cases. In one case, they were building steps up a hill, about 150 metres. They spent nearly, I think, 3 or 4 days, nearly a week, building this set of steps up this hill that would enable people to get to the well and bring the water up to the village. They got more out of doing that, they said, than what they could possibly have thought the people received in the gift of this set of stairs. The gift that they received of putting their faith into action and doing something because of their love of God and their love for other people. The challenge I would pose tonight to each of us who are in youth groups, in youth movements, in the diocese, is to take on that same challenge while we are here at home, and not just do it on those very special occasions, such as on a World Youth Day. To find some project that your youth group can be involved in, where you do something, where you sacrifice your time and your energy in doing something for the sake of others who may not be able to achieve these same goals for themselves. That, I think, would be a wonderful way in which you personally and your youth group and your parish would be able to really put this love that you have received because of the faith that you have received, this love of God, putting this into action and displaying your love of God through your love of neighbour. There are so many different groups, so many different movements that maybe your youth group could be associated with. So, to finish, I just ask you to reflect on that and see now what is it that we can do to demonstrate the faith that we have received, to give an account of the hope that we have, as St. Paul has said. To give an account of our faith and our hope is to show in a loving action this faith that we have, this hope that we have. So I thank you for listening tonight, not as dramatic or as inspirational, I'm sure, as the Archbishop, but something of that experience that I have had in World Youth Day this time that I share with you, and something of the message that the Pope has given us, and also something of that spirit of World Youth Day that we hope will linger and will enable us to work in creating a better world for others, and perhaps proving to ourselves that we are capable of being proud of our Catholic faith, and because of our Catholic faith, of doing wonderful things to make the world a better place. So thank you very much.
Hello. I just got a question for, I guess for everyone as well, it might help them. I guess because when we use social media and things like that, a lot of the times when you post things about, being Catholic and things that you support, like, we support marriage, and often, we're quite degraded, like, by, people on the internet by it, and I just wanted to know what your opinion was on that topic. Like, do we just... I know sometimes it may offend people, and I guess that's not the point of why we want to, do this. I think, we want to show them that there's a message behind everything. But is it wrong to just sit back and just not do anything rather than promote our faith and sort of help people to understand why we are the way we are, like why we want to encourage this?
Thank you, Sheldon. Sheldon's one of our pilgrims. So... The social media is a very powerful tool for the promotion of evil, but also for good. And I think one of the things that I said to a group on Tuesday, we had a Mass in the Cathedral celebrating National Marriage Day, and one of the things there that I said was, we need to prepare what we want to put out into the media well. We want to use the best possible arguments for the positions that we have on marriage or on any issue around marriage today. It's not enough just to repeat arguments that might have become stale or hackneyed, or really can be quite silly in some sense. We have to be able to provide answers to these questions, and I think the best answers to these questions come from people who talk about their own experience. So after the Mass, we had Ron and Mavis Parola, who are famous in Australia for their work to promote the family and marriage and family, and they just simply gave a little talk about the experience of their marriage. And you can't argue against someone's experience. To me, that's the best sort of argument that you can put up in any form of media, your experience of God. Not trying to perhaps prove God's existence in some theoretical way or some philosophical or theological way, but how you have experienced God in your own life. So keep at it, but use those sorts of personal experiences of God's work in your life, how he has surprised you, perhaps, in some way. Yeah. Good.
Awesome answer. Hello, awesome answer. I think Anna from Notre Dame has a question. Give Anna a round of applause, everyone.
I was just thinking, you've talked a lot about how the youth of today are trying to bring about the mission of the Catholic Church. And I'm wondering how today's methods compare to in your youth. What available methods you had in those times?
Our resources were rather limited, I'm afraid. We were very simple compared to the people of today. I was only talking to someone today about that when many of us went into the seminary in those days, we went in either during that period that we were doing our secondary education or even just after. In my case, just after, so I went straight in after finishing Year 12. And I don't think we were all that sophisticated. And we approached life in a simpler way, I think. And I'm not quite sure whether really we are much different, generation by generation, but I think people today are a lot more sophisticated. There are so many messages coming your way, and you've got to think them through, and you've got to work out your answers to them. I think we come out of different eras, but we are essentially the same people, with the same questions, with the same need to find the answer, to find the truth when we're confronted by questions that are thrown up at us. At university, it's a time in your life when you're perhaps not so coddled as you might have been in school, in primary school and in secondary school. You've got to stand on your own 2 feet a bit more. You've got to take responsibility for your life more, and it's a big challenge. It certainly is a big challenge. We didn't have to face as many of the challenges as you do today. So that's why I think we've got to work together. And that was also another message that the Holy Father gave to the priests who accompanied the pilgrims. He thanked them for the fact that they were with these young people. He said, remain with them, support them, encourage them, give them the benefit of your experience, but listen to theirs. And at one other time he said, a real shepherd is someone who leads the flock as well as is in the midst of the flock, and also at times has to be behind, okay? Leading, showing the way, being with them, getting to know them, getting to know their issues, helping them with the struggles that they have to find the answers to those issues, and from behind, keeping them going in the right direction. Okay? So I think that's really what we have to do to assist young people today. There's a wisdom that comes from living a long life when you get to 60 or 70. There's a wisdom that we can share, but we can also learn from you too. Does that in any way answer your question? Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we have another question over here. Shauna?
So we talked about the past, but in the future few decades, there's going to be a lot of changes to the church, especially because a lot of the congregation is now over the age of 60, which means the responsibility is going to be left to us, the youth. How do you think that's going to affect the church in the future?
It's going to be good. Because those 60-year-olds, I've just turned 60. Those 60-year-olds made their contribution to the church in the best way that they could, and they were young, and they were energetic, and they brought tremendous life into the church back in the 60s and 70s. It's your turn. It's your turn to bring that energy into the parishes and into the communities. And there was another beautiful thing Pope Francis said. He said, it's all very well for us to open the doors up to allow people to come into the church, to be welcoming in our parish communities and in our youth groups and in all the movements, to be welcoming. It's another thing to go through the door yourself looking for them, inviting them and encouraging them to come and join you. That's the energy that we need, and that's the work that we need from you, this new generation who have got a lot to contribute to the building up of the body of Christ. So all power to you. Okay?
I mean, guys, look around you. The church is in good hands, right? Look around you. This is amazing. So one last question, actually, because of time limitation. So, could say?
Hello, Archbishop. Oh,
Yes.
Bishop, sorry. I said Archbishop. I'm sorry. My question is this. It's been partly answered, but my question is, right now we have a lot of youths who are part of different youth movements who do different things. And, my question is, what do you expect of us as an archdiocese? How can the youth of right now help in pushing the message or the main objectives that you have set out for this, particularly this year and any other year that we participate?
Yes. The social media is one thing. You know more about that whole world than we do. And to engage in that, and we've just appointed a new director for media in the Archdiocese, media and communications, and I think he's very keen to help young people and parishioners and bishops and priests to really get the message out there in a way that's positive and appealing and in a way that will be inviting of people, We've got a big problem with, the Royal Commission at the moment, and it can be very depressing to hear the news in the media about what the Commission is about to do and about the evils in the church and the history that has occurred about sex abuse. We've got an opportunity, though, to present the other news, the news that doesn't get into the media. And I think, to me, this would be one of the biggest contributions that the young people in our communities can help us with, So I think also, as John Paul would say many times, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to step up, offer ideas, get involved in some of the more adult activities of the church. Don't be afraid to do that. It's up to the older people in the parishes to make room for you and to allow you to make your contribution. So that's the message that I give to the parishes when I go on visitation. For goodness sake, allow the young people to take their place in this community and make their contribution. So don't be afraid. Make suggestions. make your parish priest your friend. Influence him, in the way that he might not have thought of ways in which he could do parish work. You've got new ideas. Help him. Parish council. Ever thought of going on the parish council as a young person? It scares the living daylights out of most young people, but that's a place where you can become leaders within the community, learning leadership and then helping in the discernment of where this parish should be going into the next 5 years or so. So I just encourage you to not be afraid, make that offer, and see what happens.